Hi, everybody. Welcome to Science Café. So I'm Prasanta Chakrabarty. I'm the Edwin K. Hunter Chair for Science Communication and a professor in biology and a curator in the museum. That's all really one job. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. So Science Café, as you all know, is the outward-facing side of LSU, right? We want people from our departments, but also people from around Baton Rouge who don't get to come within the ivory tower, right? So invite other folks, come, there's free food. If you haven't had food, there's a themed drink, which Vince, who I'll introduce in a minute, came up with. It's called the Lab Solutions, so it's kind of greenish, and it's made from cucumber and something else, and it's kind of refreshing. But feel free to get one while we're doing this. Tonight's event will be held in partnership with the local radio station WRKF 89.3. How many sustaining members? I saw a meme this week. It plays the most beautiful classical music of all time and the most depressing news of all time is that simultaneously being displayed. But things will change. And there's a lot of great local news, so listen to WRKF. And also Campus Federal Credit Union is our sponsor, and we're so thankful for that. They're great. They sponsored the Rainmaker event last week, so thanks to Campus Federal. And here to say a few words on behalf of Campus Federal is the Communication Development and Financial Education Officer, Zachy Solomon.
This one, right?
Either one.
This one. Hello, y'all. How y'all doing tonight? It's me again. Well, my name is Zachy Solomon. I'm with Campus Federal Credit Union. We sponsor this wonderful event every month. We have a great show for y'all tonight. This year marks 91 years of Campus Federal. 91 in October. We started on this campus in 1934. It was by 7 different LSU faculty and staff. So our roots are deep in LSU, deep in Louisiana. So we really appreciate everybody. I know we have some members in the house. We really appreciate y'all being members. I know y'all know I have a table outside because I say hello to y'all every time you walk by. But today I brought some fun new stuff. I have something to clean your eyeglasses, and I have some sunscreen as well too. So trying to make it a little bit more exciting on the table. So if y'all are interested in that, come and see me. Also have a great purple and gold umbrella that we're giving away at the end of the presentation. So one of you lucky people will win the umbrella, so we'll see. All right, well, thank y'all so much for having us. We really appreciate it, and I hope y'all have a wonderful presentation and wonderful night. Thank you.
Thank you, Zachy. Letitia, you have one of the eye wash ones? So you pour that into your eyeball and you cry into your glasses. All right, it's much better than that. You should get it. And the umbrella also works. So for tonight's talk is a little different. So it's Science Cafe, but it's really Research Cafe, right? And so it's all humanities, it's the sciences as well. It's a beautiful thing. And so there's going to be a play and more information on this 2-foot by 2-foot stage, and there'll be 3 people or 2 people up here. So I hope they don't fall, but this will be great. So tonight's talk, Vince LiCata is the lead here, and he's a faculty member in the Department of Biological Sciences, but he's also director of the Center for Collaborative Knowledge, which is an amazing group that helps connect the humanities to the sciences, which we need more of. And Vince is the most creative person I know in our college. He's a wonderful person. We also have Judy, who's a faculty member at LSU School of Theater, and he's reading his notes right now, trying to get prepared. Do we have Vastine? We do. Vastine Stabler is the managing artistic director of Swine Palace Theater, and together they will discuss plays produced at LSU over the years and what makes a good science play. The SciArtists will also provide a preview of the plays to be presented at the upcoming LSU SciArts Playfest. So let's give them a round of applause and welcome them on our tiny stage.
time. Hello, everybody. So I bet you didn't know that LSU is one of the leaders in the English language at producing science-based plays. And I think it's come about organically because it started before I came here. It's certainly continued since I've come here. And we're going to tell you some about that history, some about what science play is, and then we're going to tell you about our new Science Play Festival, which is coming up in less than a month. Right now. So when you think about what is a science play, a lot of times you're thinking somewhere on this grid. And most of us, when we think about science in performance, we're thinking about documentaries, we're thinking about lectures, we're thinking about science outreach. A lot of times scientists that are involved in performative science are also listed as consultants, trying to make things better in movies or better in science fiction. And those are the things that are kind of in the middle of this slide. But what we're most concerned with when we do science theater here is the stuff that's on the right-hand side of this slide, which is really science-based creative nonfiction, where we're telling stories about real scientists and real discoveries, and science-based fiction, where it's actually a totally fictional story, but all the science in it is accurate and communicated in a way that's accessible. And so among those two concepts, or those two parts of the genre, okay, there's a lot of different questions we ask when we're looking at a science play. How much science content is in it? And different playwrights, different theater schools will answer this question differently. Some want a very low science content, where it's just sprinkled in, and some want a very high science content, where you could actually walk away and test somebody in the audience and find out that they learned some science. And actually LSU's science plays sort of tend towards that extreme, where we could actually test, and we actually have tested audiences, and we actually have found that they learned science from the play. Okay? There's also questions about whether the playwright themselves was a scientist or a real playwright. There's very few of us. I'm a scientist who is a playwright. There are very few of us in the English-speaking language, but there are some of us, and we've had them visit our campus. We've had Roald Hoffman here, who is a science playwright. We've had other people who are science playwrights here on this campus as part of LSU's sort of support of that concept. A big question in the theater is, should there ever be pedagogical content in a play? You listen to somebody like David Mamet, and he says, no, you should never learn anything from a play. Thankfully, he's only one person, and there are other people who do believe that it is perfectly fine to learn something from a play while you are enjoying it. And that, again, is the side of science theater that we try to do here at LSU. And then the science content itself is often a big question. Is it a real story about real scientists, which is what most science plays are, or is it a fictional story where you've made up a scientist, you've made up some dilemma that they're facing, and you put that in a play? That is much less seen on stage because I think people are afraid of it. Because if you're going to tell a true story about how the structure of DNA was discovered, you know who is in there, you have historical documents, you know exactly what happened. If you're going to tell a fictional story about somebody who develops a universal flu vaccine, for example, you're unmoored. That's right. You don't have facts that can moor you to that story. And so I think both playwrights and theaters are a little more afraid of that end of it. But there's more and more of it coming out. Okay? And then the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Judy to start to talk about some of the things that have been produced at LSU is another big question in the science theater genre is, how does the scientist themselves actually fit into the story? Okay, are they there as villains or heroes, which is sort of the model that started out maybe 30 years ago? Typically, it was villains. It's been trending more and more towards heroes over the past few decades. Are they there as activists rather than scientists? Activists for getting the public to believe in climate change, or getting somebody to believe a particular set of research findings where you don't see the research findings in the play, but the scientist is actually advocating for them. Or are they there really doing the science? And again, I think that is the minority in science plays, is seeing a scientist do science and making a scientific discovery. So it's a very broad, general, and I guess my major point from all of this is there's plenty of room for development in areas where you're doing a science play about scientists doing real science with pedagogical content. And I personally am interested in that type of science play, but I totally acknowledge that does not have to be what all science plays are. And so to go back to my original point when I started, LSU has been really, really a big advocate of science plays over the years. And I'll turn it over to George now, and we'll flip through a few of these slides and talk about some of the ones that have been produced here at LSU over the years.
Thanks, Vince. Thank you all for coming out. We're excited to sort of encourage you to support this creative act where we're bringing science and the arts together, which Vastine will talk about more in our current event, which is the SciArts Festival of New Plays. I've had the opportunity to work with Vince on several occasions, both as an actor and a director, and in his work as a playwright, and my own work as a professional theater artist, as well as a instructor, faculty person here at LSU in the School of Theater, the College of Music and Dramatic Arts. Has a big portion of that has been involved with the creation and direction of new plays. I was for many years director of new play development at the Utah Shakespearean Festival, and we brought playwrights from around the country for many years to develop plays that were early in their incarnation. We would bring playwrights and workshop those plays and help them to find a voice that then would lead forward toward getting a production. So I've been extremely interested in the growth of new plays and my own work within new plays. When we started working on the SciArts project, we created an event in 2019 in which we sent out the word that we were going to select 3 plays that we were going to do staged readings of here on campus, and we got, probably 200 submissions from around the country, and therefore ended up having to read those 200 plays, right? Yeah.
And I were the only ones that read all 200.
That's right, yeah. Fortunately, most of them were not very good, and we only had to read just a few pages, and we knew that we could move on to other things. But we were incredibly fortunate to find 3 very interesting plays that we did bring playwrights here. We were able to support them and give them small financial awards to support their travel and things that allowed them to participate in the reading of the plays and in the rehearsals of the plays, which were minimal, but also very instructive as we got a chance to round up some good directors and some of the very best talent in our community to create readings of the plays for those playwrights and include in the discussion of those plays some great scientific energies as well. We had scientists that visited, that Vince arranged, and over the course of that fall semester in 2019, we spent a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to find ways to hook our artistic impulses together with our science impulses. I just want to mention those 3 plays, some of which have received full production since they were produced here. But the 3 plays that we chose in 2019 were The Surest Poison by Kristen Idzak, which told the story of a murder investigation education during the Prohibition era in Chicago, and focused on forensic science. And it was a fantastically interesting and diverse kind of play that took us on a wonderful journey. Another revelation by Jacqueline Bircher that I think Vastine directed in that series was the story of two very different PhD students who were fighting to preserve their own approach to research during a time of political unrest. And we thought that was timely when we did it then. So, and the final play was Maize with an I, you know, corn, maize, that maize, by Judith Pratt, which was a sort of look at the trials and tribulations of Nobel Prize winner Barbara McClintock, who worked with strains of maize in terms of the research that they did. It was a very provocative and interesting series that raised a lot of good discussion, and we were hoping that it would lay the groundwork for a continuing series from year to year. And then you all know what happened in the next year, right? So things fell into a very deep crevice, as they did with many programs, particularly arts programs around the country because of COVID. And now we're just beginning at Swine Palace and at LSU Theater to claw our way past the darkness of that period, reestablish our production programs at the level that they were existent before that particular time, and to rebuild some of these wonderful series that we had hoped to create. So we're looking this year again at an opportunity to create this SciArts Festival. Again, we've had lots of submissions, and I haven't been as much involved with the project this year, other than Vince and I both sat, as with Vastine, on the committee that did the selection of the plays. And Vastine will probably talk about what those plays are in just a few minutes, so I won't go into that. I wanted to speak briefly about my own work on science plays, which, yes, as Vince suggests, at LSU we have had a commitment both to new plays, particularly at Swine Palace, which is the professional arm of our producing organization at LSU Theater. Plays that are new, that have an impulse towards social justice, that reach out to the communities and the concerns that we all have. And within that, as a sort of subset of that, we have been fascinated by plays that deal with science. And that was how the SciArts Festival in 2019 came about. But we also have an ongoing history of producing some science plays. The slide that's up on the screen now that Vince has is from Tom Stoppard's play Arcadia, which is one of the great plays of the late 20th century. It is, some people consider it his masterpiece. It's a brilliant play. And like most brilliant plays, Hamlet and Lear and other plays like that, you can never really do them justice on the stage. I felt like we gave it a very good production, and it was interesting work, but it's a play that infinite expectations, right? And I wrote down my quick note here about the science that's involved in that play. It starts with Newtonian physics, goes through chaos theory, the second law of thermodynamics, fractals, animal husbandry, and landscape gardening. So that's quite the evening if you manage to survive that. But one of the things that was wonderful about it is it's a lovely play about family and about tradition over a time-traveling kind of period. But it also raises all these remarkable connections to what it is to be human, and the way that science can find a way to interpret the experience of being human, and even the language of mathematics, giving us some way to try to deal with the experience of what it is to be alive in this world. So we had a lovely production of Arcadia, and we have produced other plays here here at LSU Copenhagen by Michael Frayn, which deals with atomic theory. There's all kinds of slides in here. Frankenstein, as you can well know, is about anatomy and electrocution, this image says. But all those plays have to do with some scientific elements, even though they're great stories in and of their own right. There are a number of plays that we have produced in the studio theater as well as in other spaces, like The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds, which is a brilliant play that has to do with sort of genetic things as well as the effect of radiation on botanical growth, and that's a metaphor, of course, for our human growth as human beings. Marjorie Prime is a look into the future in the 2050s and about artificial intelligence. And what else is on the list there? The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime is about an autistic young man who turns out to be quite the crime solver because he's a mathematical savant. What else have you got there? Oh, we should look at...
Oh, we got Spill.
Well, Spill, Lee Fontakowski, who is a wonderful writer with the Tectonic Theater Project for a long time, who produced her own version of the play Spill here, and she still works with us as a faculty member, particularly right now has been working closely with our graduate students. But Spill was an incredible examination of coastal environment concerns as well as the oil spill concerns that were pervasive in Louisiana, among other places around the country. But it was a wonderful event for our theater because it was an original piece that was grown and developed here and then traveled on into other venues and had other opportunities to grow. What other slides do you have there? Cocktail. I'm going to let Vince talk about Cocktail.
Well, I'd love if you talk about Cocktail, but Cocktail, yes, I wrote Cocktail, and it's about the work of pharmaceutical scientist Krisna Krisintu from Thailand. She was the first person to actually combine different anti-HIV drugs into one tablet so that you could only take one tablet and get all three drugs at the same time. And the show was about her making that discovery. We actually had her working with a working pill press on stage. And it was also about the fallout from that because two of the active pharmaceutical ingredients that she combined into one pill were from one company, and one of the active pharmaceutical ingredients or drugs was from a different company, and these companies did not like having their drugs combined into the same tablet. So yes, that was produced at Swine Palace. We got other ones on here. Were you involved in Relativity at all, George?
I was not. I know that is a very important scientific play. A Kind of Alaska is a Pinter play that has to do with memory and the loss of memory. And that might be a segue into the last thing I want to talk about, which is my relationship with probably the most important scientific playwright in American theater over the last many years. And the most prolific playwright in the world in terms of American drama, English-speaking drama, which is Lauren.
You've never heard of her. She is the only person produced more than her in the English language for the last 5 years is Shakespeare.
Yeah, it's longer than that now. She's really churned out a lot of incredible material. But Lauren Gunderson is both a colleague and a friend who I was fortunate to appear in the world premiere of her play, The Heath, up just outside of Boston. The Heath was a play about her grandfather, really, and a confluence in her imagination of her grandfather with King Lear. But the play ultimately had a great neurological science foundation. It was about dementia and Alzheimer's and the sense in which we all face those kind of losses in our lives, particularly if we're living with people people who are going through that particular transition. So it was a beautiful domestic play that traveled through time, but was also important in terms of the science that it introduced. We had mentioned Arcadia, and one of the primary characters in Arcadia is a young prodigy named Thomasina. And Thomasina, many people believe that Stoppard based on the daughter of Lord Byron, Ada Lovelace, who is responsible for some of the connections that allowed us to these days program computers. Lauren's play is called Ada and the Engine. And the engine she's talking about is a memory engine, the first sort of concept of computerized technology. And so in 1815, Ada Lovelace was beginning our journey toward where we are today in terms of the digital world. Other plays by Lauren Gunderson that you might know, what I think is her best play is Silent Sky, which is the story of Henrietta Swan Leavitt, who changed the way that astronomers look at the stars and gives us insights into how galaxies move and the way astronomers interpret the movement of stars. Lauren has written one play after another. She has a particular facility for finding women scientists who have been not spoken for as fully as they might have been over the course of history, and also those that have become very well known to us, like Marie Curie. And Marie Curie's the half-life of Marie Curie is Lauren Gunderson's play about that. So I was told I could talk for 5 minutes, and clearly I could talk about the theater for a long time, so it's time for me to stop, and I'm going to pass this on to Vastine to talk about the SciArts Play Festival that we're hoping all of you will spread the word of and join us for in just a few weeks.
Thank you, George. After numerous lunches at Nuke's over salads between Vince and Kristen Sosnowski, who's the Associate Dean of the College of Music and Dramatic Arts and head of the School of Theater, chair of the School of Theater, and producing director of Swine Palace, and on and on and on, that they were going to do this. They wanted to do this event, and I used to do a lot of readings in Alabama when I was there, and I love them. I love them a lot. They're a completely different beast from producing a real show, and they have different outcomes and different roles. And one of them is it takes a little bit of the pressure off the writer, because people go in accepting and knowing that this is not finished, and there's not really a sort of attitude. Sometimes people get at shows of prove me, you know. It's like we're all there together supporting the writer. And another thing I find interesting in it too, and I was thinking about this morning, is when you don't have as much going on, if it's just pure reading from music stands or a little movement up there, it's like reading in a sense that you start focusing on the words. And as the writer, you start hearing it, and you hear things you hadn't heard before, but you're able to put together a lot of pieces that you wouldn't pick up and put together if you were watching it. Obviously, the action and everything brings another dynamic to it too. But it's wonderful to do these type events, and with something, you know, with depth is the science plays that we get. For some reason, when people do science plays, they seem to be deeper than when they don't do science plays. But And so I was excited that we were going to do it, and I wanted to get on board of it. So, of course, COVID and everything later, and Nuke's closing is all past us at this point. So finally, we got the opportunity to do it again. So I want to tell you a little bit about this year's performance. It's going to be on the 15th, 16th, and 17th of April, and there's going to be two components to it. And actually, I'm going to let Vince talk talk, and when I'm through talking about the shows, about your speakers that are coming in, because he's got 2 really exciting speakers that are going to be part of the whole process too. Something he did last time as well that was extremely popular. So this year we had over 150 plays submitted, and you say, well, that's less than last time. Actually, we cut them off this time. We said we left a bunch in the box because we said, George and Vince, they're getting older, they can't read 200 plays anymore. So we cut it off, and again we had a lot of great plays. We really did, and it was a joy a lot to read them. Though really 3, maybe a 4th one, but 3 really stood out. And after one, it stops. It's like anything. When you start culling and culling, you go, oh wait, this is the best. This is the best. And so we ended up, and we selected 3 plays, and I will tell you about each one of these real quickly. Though he has actually better descriptions that I got than the ones I wrote. 5 Degrees Above Polaris by Karen Howells, and it's set in 1847 about Maria Mitchell, a determined American astronomer, travels to Rome to challenge the Vatican's attribution of her comet discovery in Father De Vico's what is that word?
Amidst.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It was crooked. I mean, it was crinkled. And amidst the Italian uprising, she navigates academia and romance to claim her rightful recognition. Clearly, they're not the only people who are getting older. Better Living, written by Richard Rubin. It's about Connie, a chemist at 3M, discovers widespread PFOS contamination. Her reaction clashes with her supervisor, Paul's. Years later, she seeks closure with Paul, who now has Alzheimer's, realizing his regrets. Like PFOS, are enduring. And this is a true story, right?
Yes, he's changed the names, but it's very, very, this was the most factual one of the ones that we picked when we did research on it.
Alice Warham and the Fabulation of Time is about Alice Warham, who is a brilliant physicist studying black holes. When she is approached by the CIA to become an asset, she agrees and is whisked away to the lab in Marseille, France, and she strikes up friendships with the French physicist she is spying on. She wonders if she will be able to make her breakthrough before time runs out. Now, one thing that we did when Vince and Kristen first came together to put together the SciArts is we put some parameters around the selections. And one thing that's different from kind of this list that he has of shows that we've done in the past is Vince was very determined about 2 things. One thing was the accuracy of science plays. So a lot of times I was getting an email, I just started reading a play, he says, oh, this is all wrong. I said, okay, I don't have to read that anymore because Vince ain't going to let that happen. But, and then the other thing is he didn't want to do science fiction plays. So those are kind of 2 of the parameters we had. Though those of you, I actually wrote a science play once. One thing you learn about when you're writing science, it may be accurate when you write it. When you go back and read it 10 years later, ain't so anymore. So, so as of right now, these plays are accurate. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think the science in them will stay accurate. And to sort of fit them into that context that I was talking about before, this one is a historically true situation which has been reimagined, some of the situations that occur in it, but the science is all true in it. This one, like I said, is the most accurate one. The science and the historical facts are accurate. This one is in that last category. This is a totally made-up story, totally fictional scientist doing totally fictional things. And we ran it past Jorge Pullen in physics because he works on loop quantum gravity and on black holes, which is what this character works on, and he said, everything looked good in it to me.
So we're going to hold them to that.
We should mention, you talk about the other people who helped you. We had a bunch of students in science and one or two in theater who were helping go through everything and put things together, and we want to thank them a lot. Okay, quickly, the tickets are free. But you have to get a ticket. So, because there's only 130 seats in the studio theater, which is where they'll be, which is in the Music and Dramatic Arts building. You can go online to the LSU Theater website. On the front page, they have a ticket link. We put a piece of paper out there. It's got a QR code that goes directly to it, too. But please come, pick one, come to all three. I promise you will have an enjoyable and free evening.
Yeah, don't feel like you have to come to all three, because that, I think, is a bar that keeps people from coming. But please just pick one that you think you're interested in. Please come, because the playwrights appreciate it, the actors appreciate it, the director appreciates it, and it really helps us move forward in developing these plays.
I will say the plays that we read, we did choose primarily for the science that's engaged in them, but we also gave attention to the fact that there's an entertainment value to be had. And so all three of these plays are, in some instances, funny and moving and full of different kinds of life. So it's not like coming and sitting through statistics for 3 hours, right? It's going to be hopefully an enjoyable evening in the theater that you get a chance to explore a lot of human dimension within, okay?
And then Vastine wanted me to talk about the keynote talks. In the afternoons on Tuesday and Wednesday, we have two keynote speakers. On Tuesday, we have Doran Weber from the Sloan Foundation. The Sloan Foundation, for the last 15 years at least, has been one of the leading funders for science theater in this country. They have literally put millions of dollars into science plays and into science movies in this country. And Doran Weber has been the managing director of that division of the Sloan Foundation for its entire lifespan so far. And then on Wednesday, Holden Thorpe, who's the editor-in-chief of the journal Science, is going to come. I sort of stumbled upon several of his editorials in Science where he would often bring up a play when he was talking about a scientific discovery. And so I actually emailed him and asked him if he was interested in science theater. And it turns out he's a big science theater nerd. He grew up, his parents owned a theater, and he acted in that theater as well. And he apparently goes to the theater in Washington, where AAAS's headquarters are, all the time. And he accepted literally within 2 hours of me inviting him to this.
We did want to mention at the end of each of the readings, when we have the readings with the actors and get through them, at the end of each reading, our hope is that the playwright then will join us for a brief talk back, and the audience will respond to the text itself. And as Vastine was suggesting, we're incredibly grateful for the volunteers who are going to create these readings for us, but we're primarily interested in the text itself. And so if you come and you really listen to those words, you can be on the ground floor of growing these plays as they move forward toward production. So think in terms of your own experience of what you hear and the themes and ideas that occur to you, and don't be afraid to come and share those with us.
And now I want to kick these two guys off stage, if I can pull your ear for another 5 minutes. And Wendy Hansing, who is a PhD student in biological sciences, and I are going to read a 5-minute scene from one of the plays, 5 Degrees Above Polaris. And like I said, this is based on real events. This is Mariah Mitchell, and she discovered one of the very first comets ever discovered using a telescope in the mid-1800s. And because there was a little bit of a delay, you want to turn it off? You can put out you want the, oh, okay, you can put on the closed captions. And she discovered the comet 2 days before Father DeVico, who was the Vatican astronomer, discovered it. But because, he was in the Vatican, he reported it faster. And it took about a year to figure out that Mariah was actually the one who originally discovered it. So this particular scene is early in the play, before she's really arguing for her discovery of the comet, when she's really trying to win over DeVico and get them talking about how the fact that the two of them are two of the best astronomers of that time, of the mid-1800s, but he had never even heard of her before the beginning of this. And so he's looking through a telescope as this begins.
And this is your telescope.
See.
It's a refracting scope. I use the dullard, which is also refracting, and achromatic, so the magnified objects don't get those distracting halos.
I believe that I see it. He says it is in the shape like a potato?
Yes. We can determine its size via 3 axes, 410, 260, and 220 kilometers, respectively.
Ah, there it is. What do you say he names it?
Hyperion.
That may be too big of a name for a planet's 8th moon.
Pretentious, but that's Harvard for you.
Well, what would you call it?
Cyprus. It means despair, which is how I would feel if I were an 8th moon.
So what else does your American professor say about Saturn?
That there is a 3rd ring.
A 3rd ring? And encircling and moving in synchronicity without collapse or upheaval? Odd phenomenon.
It doesn't seem possible.
And yet there it is, just a few planets away.
I imagine you and your church would ascribe the stability to a miracle, but your church has been known to err.
Perdone?
There have been many times, like you torturing and imprisoning Mr. Galilei for saying that the planets revolved around the sun, when that is what they do.
Mr. Galilei wasn't really tortured.
Before him, there was Copernicus. The Catholic Church silenced both and burnt their books.
In America, you drowned those who were accused of witchcraft.
You burnt them.
Well, we did not burn Galileo.
You still burnt a lot of things.
It is not advisable to change a worldview when those in charge of the rules aren't ready. There needs to be debates, papers, speeches, trials, tribunals.
Torture and death.
It's a lengthy process.
A rock just came through your window.
The rebels have taken to throwing rocks into my room. And you are making me very nervous.
Why do the people throw rocks?
It's part of their rebellion.
Why do they throw rocks into your room?
It's the only window that's open. Miss Guzzi, a small interruption. Excuse me, I remind you not to climb the walls of the church. It is difficult for my ears and it is not good for the stone. Anyway, as you say, your Harvard fiancé discovered a 3rd ring?
He's no longer my fiancé, but yes.
It was over 200 years ago that the planet was found to have 2 solid rings.
Until 100 years ago, when my predecessor, Pierre Simon Laplace,
My predecessor as well.
proved that a solid ring would be unstable, thereby causing him to theorize
that there might be several indiscrete ringlets.
But I don't believe he took into account the fact that the rings, even as ringlets, spin.
And if the rings, even as ringlets, are solid and also spin,
They wouldn't be able to hold their formation. George Bond proposed that they were made of liquid, but then they would slosh about.
and they would need a very low freezing point, or else we're back to solid. If it's not liquid and it's not solid, what does your Fourier analysis conclude to be the case for there to be continuous stable bands in sync and spinning around a planet?
That the rings aren't continuous. The only way for the condition of stability to exist is if the rings are composed of thousands of tiny particles like icicles, specks of dust, and small unshapely rocks that travel around Saturn at different velocities in accordance with their respective distances and gravitational pulls from the planet and each other.
So the stability of the rings is dependent on the motion of the spin itself?
It's brilliant.
That's clearly something God would have designed.
It turns out to be the gentle gravitational nudges pushing and pulling at an array of particles with slight variations and alterations over time. A symphony of changing interactions in collaboration with what creates the ring structure.
It's like a dance.
The minute adjustments required moment by moment, the perturbations, it's their interdependence and reciprocity that makes us think we are seeing a solid ring intact, but in reality,
Millions, no billions of interdependent and connected things acting in concert.
parts of a whole that are something larger than each alone. We could not understand it through mere observation, but through mathematical analysis, it's the only answer.
You are very gifted at this Fourier analysis, Miss Mitchell.
It's a language I understand.
Thank you very much. And we'll answer any questions that you have. Yes, he told me to repeat the questions. Yes. I think it's more, because you asked, where is it more common to have science theater? The question was, where is it more common to have science theater than in the English language, since I sort of downplayed in the English language. And I think in Europe it's much more common. In fact, I'm supposedly going to a conference in Portugal next fall, and they have dozens of presentations there on science theater, which I had never even heard of before. It's also much more common in England. That's English language again. I think it's also more common in Brazil, because I've seen a lot of science theater in Brazil. Again, that's Portuguese, so maybe Portuguese language is the one that keys in on it. That's what I know. George, do you know anything about science theater in other cultures or other languages?
There's been a great history of science theater in Germany, and I think in Asia as well.
Yes, Germany, definitely big. I mean, I've had 2 of my plays translated into German and produced there, so they seem to like science theater there, yeah.
Thanks a lot. This was wonderful. So I'm sort of making connections here. I'm thinking that theater often explores aspects of the unknown. Grant proposals in science also very definitely explore the unknown, the good ones. And so there's where I'm trying to make a connection here. Wondering about, so science theater, you have that spectrum from sort of science theater fiction to science theater nonfiction. And I'm wondering whether, grant proposals tend to fall somewhere along that line.
Ooh.
Good, especially good and compelling.
So he's asking, he's trying to make a connection between the way you write a grant proposal, trying to answer compelling questions in science, and the way you write a science play, trying to answer compelling questions in science. And I think you can go there, but I think the opposite is actually more usual. In fact, Lauren Gunderson, when she has written about science plays, she says that for her, the purpose of a science play is to deepen the mystery, not solve the mystery. Because when you write a grant proposal, you want to prove that you can solve the mystery. And with plays in general, a lot of playwrights believe that a good play asks more questions than it answers. And I think that is true for the science plays too, is to try and find the edges of the science where there aren't good answers yet. And then you could probably take those and write a grant proposal on them, but you want to prove that you can get an answer to it, I would think. Hi.
Hi. So you were talking earlier about, the pedagogy and something that your audience comes away with, like, some science knowledge. But I'm wondering, maybe this is more a question for the theater professors, but do you also hope that maybe there's some scientists in your audience who come away with an appreciation or knowledge about art from the experience as well?
I would hope so, but she's asking, if the audience comes away learning some science, do you also, George, hope that the scientists that go to the show come away appreciating the artistry?
I think you would always hope for that, right? That what we go to the theater for is to fill in the blanks in our own human experience, right? And what changes is your frame of reference. So when you go to a play with a particular frame of reference, the hope is that that gets expanded in some way. And so you might increase humanity in terms of your perceptions about humanity, or you might find that the work that you do that you think no one else really can ever understand and appreciate fully becomes dimensionalized in terms of its human equation. And I think really great playwrights like Tom Stoddard, they can dazzle us with science, but ultimately the purpose of it is to open us up to our own experience, that everything has a way of being understood at a fundamental human level if we can just find the right language to unlock that. Yeah?
And you can tell George has been in the theater a long time because he can project into this entire room without a microphone. And not even look like he's trying. One thing I've noticed, sort of tangential to your question too, is it's hard to get scientists into the theater to watch plays. And this has been something that I've had to deal with personally over the years. I have many very close scientific friends who I will have a 3-week or a 4-week run of a play and they can't manage to make it to any of the performances. This is extremely common in the sciences. I don't know how to solve it. There are a lot of scientists who love the theater, obviously, but I think the majority of them, it's hard to get them into the theater. But if we do get them into the theater, hopefully they do appreciate the artistry. Yes, sir. How does normal theater turn into science theater? Typically, anytime, something dropped here, anytime you talk about science. So if it's a play about a scientist discovering something, we'll call it science theater. If it's a play about people trying to deal with the effects of something like the atomic bomb, the science of the atomic bomb, you can call it science theater if they actually talk about the science that went into that and how we should deal with the science after that. It's a big range, right? You can have a little tiny mention of science, might have somebody that talks about evolution in the play, and somebody will call that a science play, even though it's only 5 minutes that they talk about that. And then you can have another play where almost everything they say is like what Wendy and I did here, where they're talking about science constantly. So it's a really big range of what people will call a science play. Yes. Yes, it definitely is. And it's been a big issue in science. So she's asking about can science fiction, because it gets the science wrong, can it propagate misinformation? And that has been a problem for years. And there are people that are trying, whole foundations that are trying to work on that. That's what the Sloan Foundation, one of our speakers, one of their missions is to make sure, even in science fiction, that the science is more accurate, okay? Even stuff like Michael Crichton's work, if you look at it over the years, it has gotten more accurate because people have gotten to him and convinced him to make it more accurate. The National Academy of Sciences has also been a big advocate of this for about almost 2 decades, they have what's called the Science and Entertainment Exchange, which is part of the National Academy of Sciences, where they will actually, for free, send a scientist to a major movie set. They'll cover all their expenses for the movie production company if the scientist is allowed to give advice on the science in the movie. And they've been doing that for about 20 years. And you can see the difference. It's slow change, but if you look over the past few decades, particularly in the movies, you can see that overall science fiction is more accurate now than it was 20 years ago. And as Gene says, they have a ways to go yet.
What tips you off on the first 3 pages that are plays?
A lot of things can tip you off. So one that I read, first page, Jesus and Einstein are having a discussion with each other. That didn't go past page 1. If something very, very non-realistic scientifically happens in page 1, I'll often kick it out. We didn't want, like George mentioned, we didn't want science fiction in here, so people see a call for science plays, they send in their science fiction play, so those get kicked out fairly quickly. I would say out of the 150 to 170 that we got this time, about 20%, maybe 25% you can kick out fairly quickly. So it's not a huge majority of them, but if it's sci-fi, if it's something, if there's time travel, if there's time travel, that's out of there immediately. That we do here at LSU, big scientific movies, or so are you asking if there have been theater versions of big movies? Is that what your question is? Yes, I don't think we've done any here, but there definitely have been. Just in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival just this past year, I go to it almost every year, there was a theater version of Jurassic Park. It was called Hold On To Your Butts. And it was one of the best shows of the Fringe. And it was almost line for line from the movie. And so that is a very common thing to do. It's done with Shakespeare too. I saw a version of The Godfather done in Shakespearean verse one time, which was really good. So
it's actually a growing trend in the theater right now that film scripts, movie scripts, are now being theatricalized, even if they weren't theatrical to begin with. So it's not unusual now for, it's still unusual, but it's not exceptional for a movie that you have seen to get a theatrical version of itself in a big Broadway show normally, because budgets would have to be very big to do those things.
yes, sir.
You talked earlier about how you've got this interface between playwright and scientist. Is it much more common to see scientists becoming playwrights or playwrights dabbling successfully in science?
So it's much more common to see playwrights dabbling successfully in science than to see scientists becoming playwrights. And there are several playwrights like Michael Frayn, Tom Stoppard, Lauren Gunderson. Lauren Gunderson actually was undergraduate trained as science, but then mostly trained as a playwright. But it's like, it's much more common to see a playwright get interested in science.
And is a doctor, a biologist, and so a lot of the science comes up in their family.
Second question, do you like science fiction plays?
Oh, I love science fiction. I don't confuse them with science plays. There's real science and there's science fiction. And to me, there's a very clear line between them. For a lot of people, it's blurred, but it's like, for me, it's a very clear line between science fiction and accurate science plays, or theater about science is what it's called. It's got various names. It's called science in theater. It's called science theater. It's called theater about science. All of those names are for things about accurate science. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, let's one more round of applause for all the speakers. Vince, George, Vastine, Wendy. The last question reminds me of my favorite Rodney Dangerfield joke when he says, when I die, they're going to donate my body to science fiction. There's two lucky winners for today's raffle, and I've forgotten the umbrella, but the winner is Kyle Harms. I knew this thing was rigged. She got it for you there. And the winner of the WRKF raffle is Deborah Ives. Yeah, congratulations. We don't have anything for you here, but we got your email address, and I also have a 50-million-year-old shark tooth that I'm going to give you. Not for Kyle. Kyle doesn't get it. Many thanks to Holly Carruth, who's standing there, Holly actually does everything for this thing, so she's sweating and bleeding for this. ORED, the Office of Research and Economic Development, thank you, who really run this thing. The President's Office, who provided the food. I hope everybody got food. If there's more, please get it. And the bartender, who you should tip, and Kelsey is her name, and she made this theme drink today. And the Varsity for giving us this space for free. That was awesome. So the next LSU Science Café will be on Tuesday, April 29th. It's always the last Tuesday of the month. And we'll have archaeologist David Chiquan, and he'll discuss his research in archaeology in Peru. It's going to be fantastic. So thank you for attending tonight, and have a good night.